Hey folks, it's Dag, and this is part 3, which is step B of building this vintage pits kit that's made by Midwest. And I've gotten a lot of emails and a lot of feedback from people. And one thing I do want to point out, which was pointed out in one of the posts on my YouTube, is that this is very therapeutic. It's very relaxing. It's very calming. It forces you to take time to do it right. So let's dive in. So step B, which is part 3 of my video series, is where we're making this basically, we're supporting the crutch on blocks. And traditionally you'd use balsa wood. And I don't have any extra balsa wood that's got, 2 inches in width. So I decided to try to look for some ulterior ways to do this, but still support this crutch and also be able to support the crutch in a way that I can keep it completely square and aligned. One thing, folks, is you want to build straight airplanes, okay? So what I did was I went into my Fusion 360 and I designed and 3D printed this little block, or whatever you want to call it. The reason the inside is hollow, it's for me to slide styrofoam in, so I have something to put my pins in. So I essentially created my own blocks that I'm going to support the crutch on. So this is what one looks like. I have some alignment places on it so I can get it centered on my workbench. I have some places to put some drywall screws in, considering I do use drywall as my building surface. And the foam is something I can put my T-pins in to be able to hold the crutch straight. So here's the crutch, and then here are the sides, and below you can see that I've started to lay my blocks out. But the thing is, folks, you want to take your time to make sure you mark everything right, okay? Like I said in the beginning, this is therapeutic. You have to take your time or you're going to end up building a crappy airplane. And believe me, I've built some crappy airplanes way back in the day because of my probably ADHD. So basically, folks, I always mark out the surface of where my essential bulkheads will go on this crutch. And then I can align these blocks in a way that it doesn't interfere with me assembling the fuselage. One thing to think about, going back and looking at this crutch for a minute, you could make this any height or width, okay? And I'm going to put all of these as step files and STL files on my Patreon. So if you want to get any of these blocks, you can. And I love doing it this way, folks. I've 3D printed a lot of tools. First of all, when you screw this down to your surface, make sure you do things square, okay? Take your time and get everything square. I don't know how many crooked airplanes I've built in my life because I just thought I could do kind of shortcuts, eyeball stuff. It's good enough. It's close enough. If you really get this stuff straight and check, and recheck, I always write that down on my building service, folks. And I always write, do it right the first time. You have to mentally remind yourself, because if you're like me, you get really excited doing these things. And folks, I know there's not a lot of kits around. You may never build a kit, but I just want you to understand, when I was growing up, these were the cool things that we did. These were how we built flying model airplanes. There was originally no ARPs. There were no foamies. I mean, everything we built, if we wanted to fly it, we had to build it by hand. And it was really cool. So a little bit back to these blocks. So I used drywall screws to secure them down, and I didn't use real long ones because I don't want it to go down into the wooden surface that's under my 2 layers of drywall that I use as a work surface. And the thing is, folks, is that you can realign these if you have put it in the wrong place. So once I got everything aligned and I know everything's straight, I'm going to take my time and go back to the drawing, go back to this. The plans, go back to the plans, go back to this. Several times in my mind, I'm going to build 4 or 5 steps ahead and see if I'm doing this in a way that might be impeded by a step coming up. Then I take all the T-pins and I start putting T-pins in it to really get it square. And you notice I've got 2 squares in this picture there. One is for the vertical alignment of centering the crutch. And the other one of making sure that my blocks were square. And folks, this is really something that I did a couple of years ago when I helped somebody on a kit building these little blocks with styrofoam in it. But these are just really slick, and it works really, really good. But again, like I said, folks, everything is about getting this all started straight, because a whole fuselage builds off this crutch. Okay. And another thing you want to think about is I always put in each one of these 3 pins, but the middle pin will be the last to come out. The side pins will come out when I start to put the side of the fuselage on. Again, you're thinking many steps down from what you're doing right now. You're looking at the drawings and you're saying, okay, step C, D, and E, is anything going to get in my way? But when I'm going to put the bulkheads on this, you know, I want this thing as secure as I can get it. Another thing I want you to think about, folks, is how are you going to glue all this together? You don't want the glue dripping everywhere and just making a massive mess. You want to take your time. And in this picture, folks, you can see the middle T-pin I've buried all the way down because when I start to build the sides, I don't want anything to get in the way. Another thing I want you to also consider when you're doing something like this is, like I mentioned just a couple of seconds ago, when you start to glue this, don't just have the glue go everywhere. The cleaner your build, the straighter the plane's going to be, and probably more structurally sound the plane's going to be. Look, when I first started building stick and tissue planes, they looked like crap and they weren't straight, but you learned from that. You learned a lot from it. And when I started building, you know, like top flight kits back in the day and stuff, I really realized how important it was to build things straight. Okay. And another thing is keep your work area clean. Okay. Folks, the more tidy I keep things, I feel like the faster the build goes and the straighter the airplane. And you're going to hear me talk about building straight a million times in this build. Okay. So what's going to come up next is these bulkheads are all going to get mounted, but I want you to look at the piece on the right, which is die cut, and the top firewall. It's not even die cut. I have to use a bandsaw. So there are going to be times that you're going to have to use some tools that you might not readily own. And back in the day, folks, we'd have to find somebody that had a bandsaw. So here, look at this. This is a die cut, but you can tell when I flip this over that the die that cut this was extremely dull. And this is the other side, folks, and you can see the die didn't go through. So I'm going to have to take my bandsaw and cut all these parts out of this die cut piece. Okay, so essentially, folks, all of these pieces right here, which is going to be in the next step, putting the bulkheads on, I'm going to have to cut out. So I'm going to cut them out before I start the next step. Another thing, folks, is you got to be careful you don't dent any of the soft plywood, soft balsa wood by setting things on it. I didn't realize, but I gouged the crap out of the sides of this soft balsa wood when I was making this. And I just took a little bit of spackle and I filled in all the little notches. I sanded it down flat. Now, these aren't deep gouges, but they were plenty deep enough to bother me. So I went ahead and used my 3D printed sanding block, sanded this down flat. It didn't add any measurable grams to it. Okay. So that's it, folks. Thanks for watching. Rock on. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next part of this video.